I have not put out there the lecture from the other day. Have not touched it. It's still sitting here on the phone. Yesterday's lecture is still sitting on the recorder. I have not put y'all into Netacad yet. I was going to do that this morning, but I've been answering emails, and then he and I had several things, other issues pop up too. So I haven't even gotten, I think I've gotten through all the emails this morning that came in since 6 o'clock last night. Because I did go to my meeting yesterday and went back to the school like at 5 o'clock and worked till 6:30 last night. And I went home and I didn't work on anything with school when I got home because I fixed myself supper, and I had to put out the newsletter for the Fort Orthorpe Kiwanis last night, actually, because the person that sends out the press release on it, I'd sent her pictures the day before, and she'd written me and said, I need information on these pictures of who's in the picture, because we had this lady from Korea play a Korean instrument for us last week, sort of a modified guitar, violin, something. K or K-la-kum, I think it's a K-la-kum, actually, but it's this big long thing that's a 12-string instrument. That's a traditional Korean instrument. And so she needed that, and I went, I'm putting all of that in the newsletter, so I need to just do the newsletter. I don't want to just type her an email and then have to type it again to put it in the newsletter, so I got that done. Edited 3 pictures, I think it was, otherwise, and had something else I needed to send out too, and that was about it. And I went at 10 o'clock, and by that point it got to 10 o'clock, so I'd exercised also, and I went, I'm going on to bed early. So I didn't touch any of y'all's stuff or look at anything with school once I got home last night. So as soon as I finish class today, although I got to get lunch some point in here too, I fully intend to put y'all into the Cisco Netacad. All of that. I did find out yesterday when I had gone to the Chattanooga Technology Council meeting. First off, it was about scholarships for IT students. And they're going to give away somewhere between probably $8,000 and $19,000 scholarships later this spring. I'm going to post the information on that in the next couple of days. Deadline to apply is in March, something like March 22nd. And it's not anything complicated. It's just for you to tell something about why you're in IT or something. It has an optional add-on piece of you telling them about some project you've worked on, or giving them a video that you've done, or a link to a web page or something else. But that's an optional item, but to tell about something on you and doing IT, so y'all can apply for it. That you have to have a 3.0. That was the biggest requirement on it. So if you've got a 3.0 grade point average, that you qualify to apply and stuff. So I'll post that. But in the leaving the meeting, and they went through this stuff, and that we made a suggestion to fix the form of something on it that I've made a suggestion on them. But otherwise, it was them telling us about on it, and they're not sure on the number of scholarships yet, and they may actually increase the value of them from 1,000, because they're waiting on one company that has given a large amount towards it each year. That gave $7,000 last year, I think it was. Waiting on to see if they're going to give, but they've already got enough money to pay for 8 of them, I think, because they had been given some other money for the scholarships this year. But then as I was walking out talking to a couple of the other instructors from a couple of other schools, and I made the comment about when I send out that email y'all got from me last night about Imagine, that the last year or two, the school's email system now, if I send that out, wants to mark me as a spammer. Because it says I'm sending too many on a message. And there's 1,100 of those I sent out last night. And I said something on that, and the UTC lady said, oh, here's the way to do it instead of doing it on a VCC, because I said I've split it up smaller because it made me do that already. But I said, but I can't, as small as I've been told by the school to keep from being marked as a spammer, I can't do, because they'd said cut them down to like 10 or 15 names on each email sent. Well, y'all can imagine how long it would take me to do, going through and only putting 10 emails on each one, send it, and then do the next one. How long that would take to do 1,100 of them. And I said, that just doesn't work. I did have to break it down to like 250 in the past because the email system said you can't put more than 250, 300 names on one email. But it didn't mark me as a spammer, but when the system marks me as a spammer, I have to contact IT for them to unmark me, or I can't send emails. It blocks me from sending emails and tells me I have been identified as a spammer. So now you all actually know a spammer. And she said, oh, the way to do that is do mail merge. And I said, you can do email from mail merge? And she said, yeah. So I went back, I tried it last night, and she said, put the names all in a spreadsheet. She said, if you've got a list of the names, just stick them in a spreadsheet and do mail merge. And so I went back and tried it, went in, because I knew how to do mail merge to print envelopes or print individualized letters to a whole list. So I've done that plenty in the past. So I discovered, yeah, you can do it to email also. That it'll link over to your email account and send it out. And so I did it. The only problem with it is it takes about 10 minutes to send out 1,100 emails on a mail merge, because remember, it's doing them one at a time, so it does one, does the next, and probably took 10 minutes for it sitting there, and the machine pretty much locked itself down doing that. But it sent them all out, and I didn't get marked as a spammer. So that worked nicely. So I got that done, and that's when I headed on home. That I'm going on home at this point because it was close to 6:30. I've been at school. Monday night was 6:30. Last night was about 6:30, and tonight it'll be 6:30. They told me it'll be the latest when I leave because I got to go to Ringgold High School this afternoon when school gets out to judge FBLA region. From 3:30 to 6:30 or something. Probably be gone before 6:30, but she said 6:30 would be the latest. But I know we do run sometimes closer there. So I will put those, I intend to do that as soon as I get back down to the office, get y'all into Netiquette. That does take a few minutes on it because I got to copy and paste your email address and your first name, last name. And I got to do those as 3 separate fields, so that's a 3 separate copy paste operations because I got to put the email address in. It's got to search and see if you exist in Netiquette first. If you do, it comes up and just lets me put a check mark on you and say add you. But most likely y'all don't because you most likely haven't done anything with Cisco before, although you think somebody said they had in here or the other class. But if they had, it'll be quicker for me. But if they haven't, then I got to click new at that point, and then I got to paste in y'all's email address, and then go back and copy your first name, copy your last name, paste those each in, and then it adds them, and it's done. But between the 3 classes, that'll take a few minutes to do. So I'll get that done. So then we'll be set to go on that. So we went over the other day, we did the syllabus, I showed you Netacad, which by the time y'all get on Netacad now that you're going to go, what in the world did he even tell us? But I really didn't give you much information there. And then we went through Blackboard and y'all saw generally how I've got stuff set up there. Remember, your first stuff is not due till the 22nd. Although y'all do need to go out there and do send me the note, not send me the note, but post in the first no-show assignment, do post the note in there that you have seen the syllabus, okay? That's not an item that's graded for you. It actually doesn't make any difference on y'all being marked as no-shows, but I really do need the statement that you have seen the syllabus. There is an error on the syllabus that I put in the note yesterday to y'all about my schedule for this week. That was pointed out to me yesterday, that the second set of hours on each day that I've got out there is not correct. It should be PM, not AM. I don't have office hours on Monday and Tuesday night at 2 to 3 AM. It should be 2 to 3 PM. That, like I told y'all also, as long as I'm here, I'll work with people during whatever time. That's just a suggested time, and I may not, if you just go down there to try to find me at that point, you may not find me in there at that point. Generally, I should be here those hours, but I could have a meeting or whatever up here. Like yesterday, that I was at the Chattanooga Technology Council meeting. So I didn't meet 2 to 3. Today, depending on when I run and grab something to eat, and I'll have to figure out what I'm going to grab real quick. I should be probably sitting in the office working on this stuff. I've still got a pile of stuff to do. So in chapter 1, they're going through and giving you an overview of what networking is. If you look at the key terms, there's 3 million of them for this chapter. Some of those terms you may already know. Some of the terms you may not know, and you may know part of the terms or whatever. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on that. And so the chapter, like chapter 1 in most courses, throws you a whole lot of stuff in the chapter, but vaguely covers it because the rest of the book actually covers in depth everything that's talked about in chapter 1. So they're really giving you a summary of the book in the first chapter. Does that make sense to everybody? So they're talking some also for you to get the idea in here about what networking is, and what we're going to be talking about in the course. So the first thing that they go in and talk some about is just in terms of what networking is today as they term it, and about what can we do with the networks and where we're using them out there. And then they get into some other stuff off of that. So they talk about that the networks are continuously in all of our lives today, which for the group of y'all, as they all look like you're all on the younger edge on it, that you've not been out of high school too long. Pretty much for your whole life, you've been dealing with networks. But doing networking is a relatively new thing out there, okay? And having devices all connected together. So they give you some idea in terms of that, but we're into a totally connected world today in a lot of ways. So that you don't have very many machines that aren't connected out there anymore. And we're looking at drastically connecting more devices on together. Because just like in your cars, you've got computers in them today, running them. But what are you moving to in terms of the car? Right now, there's still standalone computers sitting in the car. And what are we moving into with that at this point?
Self-driving cars.
The self-driving cars, which are going to be interconnected computers between those cars to the other cars and trucks out there. Okay? So cars are all going to be networked then. Instead of right now, you've got those little tiny small computer chips sitting in the car controlling stuff, but it sits there standalone on it right now. But all of that stuff's going to now be starting to become interconnected. Just like with your drones, that no longer all the things flying up there controlled by humans up in the plane, but you've got the drone being controlled by somebody somewhere, which may be, as far as government-run ones and business-run ones, somebody way on off. Now, if it's you flying your own drone, you've got to stay within visibility of it. So that's the way the laws work. Okay? Unless you've become a commercial drone pilot, and then you can fly the drone out of sight. But otherwise, if y'all go out and fly a drone out there, or if I go out and fly a drone out there, we got to keep it within sight to stay within the legal parts on it. Okay? Well, obviously that doesn't work for military applications on it, or a lot of the commercial applications you're talking about. But that's where you're going to have control from elsewhere controlling it. So that's all changing on that. But if you go back, not that far back, if you go back to the 80s, you didn't have machines connect. What machines you had connected to each other was just on separate little networks everywhere. And then I remember us starting to network them together, and networking devices together, that up through into the 80s, early 90s, that you were mostly standalone devices unless you were networked within an organization, just sharing stuff within that organization. And then you went into the connection of everything everywhere with the internet there in the mid-90s, once the World Wide Web appeared. Now, that doesn't mean that before that you didn't have some use of the internet, but it was real limited till the World Wide Web appeared on it. Okay? Because I actually was using the internet since, I guess, about 1975. And the internet got invented in 69. Okay? But 93, with the World Wide Web invention, that it then became something we could all use at home, and that you could use domain names instead of IP numbers. Although you are going to learn the IP numbers in this course, because that's how it really runs behind the scenes on the network. But all y'all have to remember now is, all of us have to remember, is just a domain name, which is rememberable. But if his website was 172.168.1, and you had a website for your company at 98.3.4.2, and somebody wanted to come look at either one of y'all's website, are they ever going to remember those addresses? No. Okay? But prior to the World Wide Web, remember, that's how it was. And you didn't have websites, but you had materials out there you could share and everything else. And like libraries were online, and you could go find a lot of library materials from universities and stuff by going, but you had to know their actual address for their organization. And so back there in that time period, I had actually used some of that and actually had an internet connection when I was at Swainsboro Tech. Years, probably back to about 1988, 89, somewhere in there, that we had gotten an internet connection. But the only computer that was connected to the internet there initially was my computer, and then we had a couple of people in the office, because we had student record system, connected back to Atlanta off of it, and they used that. And very little use of it, and I'd actually gone out and found some things at some libraries of when I needed some materials. But very few people used anything of it until it became friendly, which is what the World Wide Web gave you, and with DNS. So now you've got everything connected everywhere. So we've moved into that approach on it. And that you've got all kinds of stuff being shared that you didn't have. They talk about the no boundaries there, and that they're saying that we can exchange information through the whole world and everything else, and so that has made a huge difference on that one. And then they talk about some of where they mention about a number of forms of communication that's used today that goes through networking. And I guess they got this one. They got rid of one somewhere along the way that they used to put on there that was going, why is it on here anymore? So they mentioned texting, and that you got the live communication between, real-time communication between two people or more, texting each other. And you actually had that on back in the past, because there in the 70s, I remember when I was working at the college I was at, running the computer center there, that the students ran their stuff on, and we were actually connected, and it was near Charlotte, North Carolina, and we were connected to a computer in Columbia, South Carolina, where we were actually running this stuff, and that we would communicate back and forth, the operators, we'd write messages back and forth to each other, and we were really essentially texting each other because it was live right then. Except that's not what it was called at that point, and that we would talk back and forth to each other on it. So it wasn't something, it's not something totally new. Social media has definitely appeared from 2000 or so forward, because it wasn't there, really wasn't there much before 2000. So just about in y'all's lifetimes. And that we've got all the communities out there where everybody can share everything with everybody, and if you look at it, sometimes you're going, there's way too much stuff here shared out there sometimes. And then we've got the multiple social media sites now, so that there's different ones used different ways, and that you've got a heavy usage of different ones, and then you've got controversies on what's been out there or how they in turn share information out, because you've watched Facebook several times in the last year get in trouble about where information that's been put on there has been shared with other organizations that people may not have wanted their information shared out to, and that you've got that whole big issue on that one, and that you in turn, and even them sharing it with other software, although some of them I'm not sure, I question them getting in real trouble for it. Facebook sharing with WhatsApp on people's information, I'm not sure what the big controversy is, because WhatsApp has been bought and is owned by Facebook, and that they're saying Facebook shouldn't be sharing with WhatsApp. Well, if they're just part of that whole big company, I would have an expectation anyway, myself, that if I put stuff out with one company that's owned by the same company, that probably that information's available to the different organizations within the big company. I wouldn't think that they had to keep it all separate, because that's part of the idea of buying these other companies and bringing them in, is that you're sharing stuff between you. But there's that one on that. And then you've obviously got lots of other social media sites, Facebook being the big one out there currently, but whether it'll continue to be the big one, who knows? Because you had, what was it, MySpace before that, I think, which isn't much of anything sitting out there anymore, because I did have a site on it. And then you've got the new ones out there that people are saying this one or that one's going to take over. Twitter's been determined that they claim they're going to replace Facebook, but I don't see that happening. And that, yeah, I know we've got a president that loves Twitter. Probably needs somebody to stand over him, tell him, don't tweet things all the time. That he probably wouldn't have as much controversy if he didn't send out as much stuff as he does. Then I go into the Twitter, and I've got a Twitter account that I've actually had since about the time Twitter started. That I can't figure out what all to be able to find information out there on Twitter. That it's their organization doesn't strike me as organization. So trying to do things, I use it once in a while. The biggest places I use Twitter is when I go to some conferences. There's been several conferences now use Twitter as their way to give out door prizes and tell you to tweet things with their hashtag on it, and then they pull them in off that hashtag and they pick a number, and it's that number of the tweets they've got sitting out there to decide who wins the prize. So I tweet when I'm at those conferences accordingly to get myself eligible for a door prize. And then Instagram, I like Instagram, but it's basically just for sharing your pictures out there. But it aggravates me on trying to put very many pictures out there because it's limited to 10 pictures at a time. And a lot of times when I'm wanting to put pictures of stuff out there, I've got 30, 40, or a lot more pictures to put out of whatever it was. One, I got to download them onto my phone and then only upload 10 at a time. And that takes time to do it then, which is not friendly. I had heard they were going to start letting you upload more at a time, and that they were going to let you upload from a phone, from a PC, but I haven't seen that. Because even if I take pictures on my phone, I generally, sometimes I will upload a picture from there, but I'm generally going to download those pictures to my computer, edit them in Photoshop before I go and do something with them, because they're not always exactly like I want them. I'm going to predominantly take pictures on my camera because it's shooting better pictures. Yes, my phone does have 6 or 8 megapixels on it, but the difference is it doesn't have the good lens on it, and I can see the difference on them. Although I do use it more and more to take pictures, but I'm still use the camera predominantly. And so if I took it with the camera, I've got to in turn download it to the computer, upload it to the phone, and then I can put it on Instagram. So lots of social media. They talk about collaboration tools. You've got a number of those so that people can work together to doing different things. So those are out there. Blogs are out there. Blogs have been around for a long time. So that blogs have been here since in the late 90s. I've had a couple of blog sites since back then. I've got one out there that I try to put my articles on, but I'm actually behind on it because for some reason I don't ever remember to copy my articles to the blog site. And so I need to go out there and put again on it. Several years ago, I took a month-long trip out west that me and a friend of mine, that we set out and just drove out west and back for a month and stopped and visited all kinds of places. I kept a blog on that trip. And so if you go out there, I think it's on the Google blogs, if I remember right. I've actually got a blog sitting out there where each day I'd write up about what all I went and saw that day on that month, which was a really neat trip. If any of y'all have come to my office on the other campus, there's a big picture hanging in my office with all pictures from that trip on it. And it was a neat way for me to for people to keep up with what I was doing on the trip that time while I was gone, because I would just post it on the blog every day, and I told all the ones that wanted to keep up with where I was and stuff to just check that blog every time. Today, I might still do it on blog, but I'd probably also sit there and post that on Facebook every night, as the approach on it. So those are there, and then others could respond back on it and such also. Wikis are out there where people, all different types of people, edit and put things together out there. And so you've got a number of wikis that y'all are well aware of. That is, the fact that everybody can share and put stuff out there is really neat, but it also means that you can't always depend on the information that is there at a wiki. So Wikipedia works real nice to get basic information on some subject to start with, but it is not an authoritative place that you can use for when you write papers or whatever, because you don't know who it is, put the information out there and whether it's really correct or not. But if you don't know something about some item, it's a good place to go find out what it is as a general thing and then go dig deeper to get completely accurate information. Podcasting's out there where you can put audio files out there that people can then download and listen to wherever they want. As a matter of fact, with the way I'm doing with the lectures in here, that's where I'll have a number of students actually will use the lecture that I post out there, that they really are using it more as that it was podcasted to them, and that they can pull it down, stick it on their phone, whatever device, and listen to it at whatever point during the day on it. Peer-to-peer file sharing is another one that some of y'all may have been doing, or some of you may do. Change that wording. But that's where that you can put stuff out there and share it with other people, and that everybody shares with each other, and it's not stored on a central location, but you're actually sharing from your machine. It's how a lot of music sharing was originally done, and still is done to a degree. And other files and everything else are shared, and that just people share things off their machine, but it's not put back to a central machine, which is what drives some of those people that own that stuff crazy, because they really can't trace down where it's being shared from, because it's being shared everywhere. So, and it's where everyone's equal sitting out there on the internet on it. So you're going to use those for lots of ways. Now, let's throw a couple of terms at you right there that I just thought of when I said it. It's further in the chapter, and I think they're important terms for you to be aware of differences of. There is an internet with a big I, there's an internet with a little I, and there's an intranet. And they'll talk about extranets and some others later on in the chapter also. But let's just talk about internet and intranet right here, because you use the internet with a big I all the time. Okay? That is the internet that's connecting all the world together. Now, it's internet because it is a connection of networks. So you're sitting in here using the school's network connected to the internet. At home, when you're on your computer or your phone or whatever connected to the internet, and I'm going to generally use the word computer generically a lot of times here in class, which could be your phone, your or any computer or anything else in between there. Okay, all of those are going to work the same. That you're actually on a network there at your house that's connected out there to all these other networks. Does everybody understand on that? And then that, as far as that big one out there, starts with a capital I. So most of the time when somebody's talking about the internet, they're talking about the internet with a capital I. Okay? There are also internets that start with a lowercase I. It's not the real big internet, but it's where networks are connected together, which may be connected to the big I internet or may not be. So that, for instance, here at the school, we've really got a group of networks, that each of the campuses is actually a network sitting there. Does that make sense? And they're connected together and share things across on them that doesn't always get shared across the big I internet. Well, because you've got multiple networks connected, it's a little I internet. And internet's actually an abbreviation for inter-network. Okay? Oddly enough, with Skills USA, the name they give to their networking competition is internetworking, which was the word that used to be used for when you were doing networking of connecting networks with networks. Okay? Now it's just networking, or that they're networks, although they're big internets, big networks out there. And that was this word Cisco really liked, but that was back in the late 90s, tiny bit to the early 2000s, but that term basically went out of use 15, 20 years ago. Skills USA is still using the term, and they don't understand why they don't get a whole lot of participants in that competition. Well, most people don't know what it is, because when they see it's internetworking, they're going, well, what is that? And that's a single word. Okay? If they just call it networking, they'd have a whole lot more people in it. But that was the word Cisco really liked back in the 90s. And actually, if y'all go back and were to find one of the copies of, original copy of your book, which I've actually got sitting in my office at Walker, the version 1 book, it was Introduction to Internetworking, not Introduction to Networking, because that was what they thought was the word to use everywhere, but Cisco was primarily the only one on it. But you would have thought that might have been adopted more because Cisco was the company of networking back then. Still is predominantly, because back in the 90s, probably somewhere around 90% of all routers, which are the devices that you use to connect networks together, with that being a router right there, it connects a couple of networks together on it, and that Cisco made 90% of them that were out there on the market, okay, of the big ones, which is what this one is, to connect large networks together. Because that box there is probably $800 to $1,000, okay? There's a reason that we keep the door locked. As opposed to your router modem at home is more limited on what it can do. That's got a whole lot more capability to it. That yours is very limited to what it can do to it. Today, Cisco probably makes up somewhere, I think the last thing I saw not too long ago, somewhere about 40 to 60% of the market of routers and switches. At that time, they weren't doing switches, they were doing hubs. Switches are just more intelligent than hubs and run a whole lot faster. And we'll talk about them later in the course. Because you plug all your devices back together into a switch, or you did into a hub, and then you plug the switch back into the router. Or if you've only got one or two devices, you can plug them straight back into the router, although like what you've got at home really is a router and switch combined. And which a lot of people are going to tell you is a modem, but it's really not a modem. Okay? Because we used to use modems to connect to the internet, but you're really not using a modem anymore. Because a modem technically goes from digital signal to an analog signal, which is what goes across the telephone lines your telephones work on. But now you're sending a digital signal from your computer, because your computer works in digital, because it's just got zeros and ones. and it's not sending it across the telephone line as an analog signal now, which says that it's a proportionate part of the signal to represent each character. It's doing it digital across whatever connection you're using, be it cable, or if you're using DSL, guess what? DSL is doing digital across the telephone system. Okay? So you're doing digital to digital, so you're no longer converting digital to analog. So it's not a modem then. It's really a router sitting there. A limited router, but it's a router. So Cisco's still the large one out there. They're still the elephant in the room. That a huge amount of stuff built out there. Now, there's a number of other companies that build parts of it. Some things that actually, in some cases, some stuff has spun off of Cisco, because Linksys used to be part of Cisco, and now it's a separate company. And that's one of your predominant, obviously, makers of your home routers. And then you've got several others out there. But Cisco still being the large one of it. Though I say at one point, there in the late 90s, as the internet exploded with the World Wide Web, and on past into the early 2000s, probably somewhere 75 to 90% of all routers and switches / hubs were made by Cisco. And even today is still 40 to 60%. And when you look at the other number of companies that build routers and switches, them having 40 to 60% of the market is still a huge amount of the market. And so they tend to be the standard everybody else looks at. They also were the one that first really did these commercial academies with, like where y'all are in the Cisco Academy now, because that's what your curriculum will be with and everything. Most people would label them as far as doing that type of approach, and this would include myself on that, they're the gold standard on it. Because once y'all get into NetAcad, you're going to discover that the curriculum they got out there is complete and is comprehensive on it. And it's got a lot of neat little extras on it. Because when I showed it to y'all the other day, if you remember, the left side of it was an illustration, and then they had text on the right side. Where that illustration was, in a lot of cases, they've got something for you to do right there, or an illustration that is a movie type one, and that it'll take you through showing stuff to you, or may actually be a short little movie to play right there that goes with what they're showing you, telling you in the text on the right side, which gives you a whole lot more than what the book does. Okay? However, for a lot of us, that reading the printed page is easier than trying to read that down the side of the page right there. And it's basically the same stuff now. Now, they will tell you real quick that the advantage of the online is when there is errors discovered, they can go in and change it and correct it, and they do that. Okay? And they are listening for input on it. Last semester, I pointed out to them a couple of errors in there, and they said they have fixed those. Likewise, their tests are sitting online, and there was a couple of things we found were errors in test and that I told them about. A couple of them they told me right off they were fixing right off, and then there was one or two that I told them about back in September. They wrote me in December and said, well, we finally run it through our whole review process, and we've determined you were correct, the answer or the question was wrong, and we're going to fix it. And that they can then immediately make the changes on that takes effect immediately. Obviously, to make a change in the book, it's going to have to wait till they go to do their next printing of the books. And so there's a delay on that. So sometimes there may be more accurate information or more current information out there in the web stuff. because it is a changing world. So there's a big I internet and a little I internet. So everybody see the difference on the two? So if you're just talking about a group of networks within your organization that are networked together, or look at the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia actually has its own network. We're part of that network, so that when this network from GNTC actually connects back into Atlanta, okay, via the internet actually nowadays, but we are actually connected back into their network, along with all the other schools and all the other agencies' networks, which means the state of Georgia has its own internet, little I, okay, which actually is most of it is part of the big I internet. But there are some parts of it that they don't put out onto the internet, big I. Does that make sense to all y'all? Now there's some things on it that now they've gotten where they're putting more of it out there, but you secure it off. So, like the school has its own couple of intranets, which is a network within your organization to be used by the people in the organization. What thing can you think of here at GNTC probably is an intranet? It may be available in turn out on the internet, but it's really intended for use within the school. My GNTC. Although we have expanded it out now where you can access it from the internet, but it's really just for within the school, because it's information about all the students in the school and the faculty. Okay? Not so much our information on the faculty's part, but it does have what classes we're teaching and all of that type stuff. So it's an intranet. There's also an intranet out there for the faculty, which for a long time was just available when you were at school, but it really needed to be expanded on that so you could get to it from off school. Because if you go down to the bottom of the web page for the school, you'll see there's faculty and student faculty resources link down there, and y'all can click on it, and then it tells you about some different things that's the faculty's got, but you can't get to it unless you've got a faculty ID and password. And that takes us to forms and other reports that we can get about different things here at school. Actually, when I sent that email to all of y'all, to the 1,100 business and computer students yesterday, there's 1,104 students at GNTC taking computer or business courses this semester. That number probably has changed, but at 6 o'clock last night it was 1,104. Okay, because I'll have to run that again today to update, and then probably next Monday to update on students that have added one of those classes that they'll be able to get to Imagine and VMware. I won't send out the email again that tells you about on it, because most people got that, and the few others that have added, if they need some information, they can write and ask, or ask their teacher, and their teacher's going to tell them, write me, because I'm the administrator for those two. Actually, Imagine is part of Microsoft's Academy, and VMware has their Academy. Both of them have some course stuff out there, but it's very limited on what they've got in the courses, and it's not very well designed. Y'all may well use materials that's in the Palo Alto Academy, because I told you the other day, and I may say yesterday, but really mean Monday, that y'all probably take a short cybersecurity course from Palo Alto this semester. Okay? And Palo Alto has their academy, which is a little better than Microsoft's, but nowhere near what Cisco has. although Palo Alto says they're trying to copy and do like Cisco. But they're not willing to. I think the big part is they're not spending the money Cisco is. For each of your classes at the Cisco Academy, Cisco says it costs them $1 million to build each of those classes, because of how intensive that online is, also writing the book and putting all of that stuff out there and maintaining it. And they used to use their own platform, and now they use Canvas to do it. Canvas is just another learning management system, LMS. I told you you're going to learn lots of letters in this class. If y'all eat a bowl of alphabet soup, that when you dip your spoon in and pull out 3 letters, hopefully by the end of the semester you can probably tell whoever you're sitting there with that those 3 letters stand for something. Because they probably do in computer world. So I think just about every letter of the alphabet I've seen used in something, and that I probably know of something that it's being used in. So you've got tons of ways out there on it. So having said that about intranet, and so some companies will have, a lot of organizations will have their own intranet, which is where it's stuff for people within the organization. Extranets is where it's stuff they've created just for people that are related to that organization, that they have for that. So it may be, if you were a store, it would be for your customers, where you've got some things you post out there just for your customers. That would be your extranet. It's for the outsiders, not for the insiders. But not for everybody in the world, but where it's people that are related to you. And that it may be for people that sell stuff to your organization, that they would use an extranet, where the people working within your company are using the intranet to handle all of it. So when I need to go out there and get that list of names, I use the school's intranet. And that if I need to get a list of who's in the class, the intranet will give me that. Or if I want to go out and see what Mr. Spurlock's teaching, I can go on the intranet and get that information. Does that make sense to everybody? Y'all see the difference between the 4 terms? I said I was going to tell you 3 there, and I gave you the 4th one. Extras for the people outside the organization. Internet, big I, is for everybody in the world, where everything's shared together, where it's stuff that's everybody's sharing with everybody. Little I, intranet, is where it's a group of networks, but it's not everywhere in the world, but it's just a smaller group of them. Okay? So then they talk about networks of different sizes. And here they go somewhat to the same degree of taking it to a different direction than what we just said. So talking about networks of multiple sizes. So they talk about their small networks right on up to the internet, where it's the network of everything out there that connects millions of computers together. So I mentioned about small home networks first, and even if you only have one computer at home connected to the internet through your router modem at home, you actually have a network in your house, even with just one computer sitting there. And the way it's set up today, it's actually set up as that is a network, but it's a network of one device. Now, in a lot of cases, that's not what you've got there in the house anymore. You've probably got a couple of computers sitting there connected to it, and your phones may well be connected to it, that you're using the Wi-Fi on it and stuff. So you can definitely picture that's quite often a network at home also. Although until we went to going to having multiple devices in the home, and y'all can all still, I think on when y'all only had one computer at home that you all had to share. Now, you probably, most if not all of you, have got multiple computers sitting in your house connected to the internet that several of you are on at the same time, unless you're living by yourself at that point. So that me, living by myself in my apartment in Lafayette, normally there's only one computer connected to my network, but that's computers. My phone is connected also. So now I'm actually sitting there with a multiple device network when I'm at home. Right now at the moment at the house, there's one computer sitting connected to that network because I leave the computer running 24 hours a day. Now when I'm gone on the weekends, normally I shut it down for the weekend, but during the week I ran it. It was already running when I got home last night, and then I just left it running for the night, and then I'll get on it tonight. Sometimes I've actually got it doing stuff there because I'm uploading pictures or whatever that I'll have doing on later on. So you've got small home networks that connect just a few devices to the internet. Now obviously with the Internet of Things and everything else, that's no longer that small home network is going to not necessarily always be a small home network. Because if you've got your parents and 2 or 3 brothers and sisters, well, right off you may have 5 phones connecting to it. Y'all may all have your own laptop or iPad or whatever, or Chromebook, or computer sitting there connected to it. If you bought the latest refrigerator or toaster or whatever out there, it may be connected onto it also. If you've got a security system in your house, that it's connected to it. And so on, so that you've got lots of devices connecting to it. I took a course on the Internet of Things this summer, and we were hooking up all kinds of devices as part of that class so that we could sit there and control the thermostat through the internet, control the light bulbs all through the little house type thing we were setting there, media devices. We had a Ring doorbell we worked with, and that was rather neat on that one when they went to demonstrating that one of the instructor, because he had a Ring doorbell at home and he showed us what it was showing at home, and then about had a fit because his front door was sitting there wide open and he didn't have wasn't anybody around, and he's going, why is my front door wide open? And went into a panic on it of whether his house had been broken into, and discovered that his wife was actually carrying in groceries to his home that was 1,000 miles away from where we were sitting at that point of him demonstrating it. So rather neat things you can do with the whole stuff on it. Then they talk about the small office, home office network, and that they're defining that as one that connects to a corporate network or accesses centralized shared resources. That one there, I would tell you that probably in a large number of cases, what we were just talking about, really those two are the same at this point now. That no longer is that small home network of just connecting a few computers to the internet true. You're connecting a number of devices now to it. So you're really, those two have crossed over, and I would say they would all fit into that small office, home office network. Okay? And so you put them all as that SOHO. You will see that acronym out there at different times. And if you go shopping for some computer devices, you will see it will say on it is for SOHO or whatever. And you'll read that term used. So be aware of what that acronym is. Then they talk about medium to large networks, which is where you're getting on larger than those and where it's within a company or within a school or whatever. So that this is a medium to large network here. Notice they didn't use the word small network, because really that's probably fitting back and down to the other, and what they're defining as medium now. Of what we used to, what might have said was some organization had a small network In a lot of cases, it probably is fitting into where they're defining as medium now. Okay? And then they go on up to the internet with the big I, where you've got hundreds of millions of computers around the world. Now, not all of them can access everything that others can. In the U.S., with the internet, you can pretty much access everything that is accessible by anybody else in the world, that we're not blocked on it. If you go to other countries, in some cases, you can't access sites that we can access here. When I was in China in 2005, I could get on Blackboard, because I actually did do some stuff for my classes from China while I was over there, but I could not access my own personal website. That dwightwhite.com was blocked by the Chinese government. My assumption is on that one is that they blocked it because I wrote an article about Tiananmen Square back in the late 90s, and it's posted on my website. And the fact that it had Tiananmen as a word on the site, that brought up their automatic blocking on it. But I could not access my website from within China. But I could go on Blackboard, and I was communicating with students through Blackboard and then through regular email while I was over there. That is one of the nice advantages of the internet and everything that we've got out there now, that we can communicate from anywhere. And so we can have class. And so like in March, I will probably go to North Carolina for a conference for a couple of days. I can still, while I'm sitting there in North Carolina, grade y'all stuff, send y'all notes about everything, just like I was here. I'll be able to have Collaborate session for any classes that I have a Collaborate session scheduled for those evenings. Because last semester, I did Collaborate, and Collaborate is Blackboard's program out there that allows us to have live sessions between students and instructors. It can also be used just for recording things, because if y'all got Mr. Spurlock for a class, he's recorded some things through Collaborate for y'all to watch in that class also. But it can also be used, I use it for a live one, so that if I have a Collaborate session, I won't do it with y'all, but you may see me, a message about it pop up in yours, because I'm going to do it for the online students. I'm going to have an evening where I will have a Collaborate session with them. You'll see me reference into it sometimes in announcements, because all my online sections, I will have a Collaborate session every week with them. Last semester, they were all in the evening. And that when I went to Florida for a funeral in December, from the motel down there, I had my Collaborate session on that evening just like normal. Just did it from the motel room. When I was in Dallas, Texas, or just outside of Dallas, and Frisco, Texas, for some training in September, that Wednesday when I flew out there, when I got out there, I then had my normal 8 o'clock Collaborate session with my students that evening from the motel there. Almost didn't do it that night because my airplane flight got delayed by an hour and a half out of Atlanta to start with, and then the shuttle that I caught out there to take me to the hotel that I had prepaid for, they picked up some other lady and took her someplace outside of Dallas first that didn't have a reservation. And I think I got a complete tour of all of the suburbs of Dallas that night before they finally got me to my hotel on what was supposed to be a 30-minute drive. Took an hour and a half or 2 hours to do. So by the time I got to the motel, when I checked in at the motel, I barely got up to the room and connected up my computer and got online with the Collaborate session. But I was able to do it wherever I was. When I was in France a year ago, I actually sat there and would email back and forth with students from over there, because while I was sitting there. So we can work from wherever. They then talk about clients and servers and peer-to-peer. We mentioned peer-to-peer vaguely a few minutes ago. The peer-to-peer networks and client-server networks are two different type networks you can have as far as within where you're sitting more often. A client-server network is what a lot of times people will think in terms of networks. That's where you've got one main machine and that all of the other machines are pulling stuff off of that one main machine. Does that make sense to y'all? You're doing client server right here in this room. Because for y'all to get on those computers, what did you do to start with?
Log into the service.
You had to type in your username and password, right? It was checked off of a server downstairs in the building. Actually connecting back to Walker, pulling off of the machine from there. But it checked your username and password to make sure they were valid to let you on the computer. So guess what? You're doing with a client server approach there. You could pull information from that server also, or from another server. Does that make sense? So we've definitely got security off of a server. Y'all may not be so much sharing information off a server, but if you go into a business, you may well have files that are kept on the server that everybody accesses. Okay? You are doing actually a client server approach also with Blackboard, because when y'all go to get certain files, and you'll have files or videos or whatever to watch in my class, you're getting that from a server and working from the server on that. And your machine is a client. Peer-to-peer is where all the machines are equal and everybody just, each machine is responsible for itself. So if we had a pure peer-to-peer network, which could be connected to the internet, okay? Your home network is usually a peer-to-peer network. You don't have a server at home. Each machine is responsible for its own security. Now I said usually because occasionally I get some student that their family has bought a server and has their own server in their house to control everything. But most of us don't. We leave it peer-to-peer and each machine keeps up with security. So if you go to get on a different machine, you have to know what's the username and password for that machine. So like at home, if I'm using my desktop and my laptop, which I do at times, that I've got one logon for my desktop and another logon for my laptop, and I've got to remember them both. If I was doing it in a client server, I just use the same logon for them both, because if I switch y'all at desk y'all are sitting at, y'all can both then log on to the other computer and work just like you were before, right? So you're in a client server. But if we had peer-to-peer, either we'd have to go around and set up all of those usernames and passwords on each machine, or that you just have to know for that machine. Does that make sense? So that means if your network gets more than 10 or to 15 machines, and depending on the book you're reading and the company that's dealing with it, Microsoft I think leans towards 10 now, a lot of other organizations lean towards 15, that if you get more than 10 or 15 machines on your network, you want to go to client server. It's going to be cheaper for you to have a server to keep up with that information than to try to keep it all on the individual machines, because if somebody goes to change the password in a peer-to-peer, it's got to be changed on every machine. Now you think if we had in the school here everybody's logon information on every machine and a password was changed, there is no way they could go around and change it on all the machines, right? So peer-to-peer says they're all equal. Now you can have a network that really works as both peer-to-peer and as client server, because he can have a file sitting on his machine right now that you've just typed up something and we want to share it with everybody else in the class. You can sit there and go and right click on that file and you can share it. Okay? And then y'all can click find his machine on your list, go to network and you'll see his machine listed, and you can click on it and it would show that file and you can access that file from his machine. Does that make sense? And you've probably done that some, okay? That's peer-to-peer networking at that point. He's responsible on his machine for the security of that file that's on his machine. You'd be responsible for you're still responsible for the security of all the stuff sitting on your machine. As long as you don't share it, you've set the security, you don't want anyone else being able to access it. But you could go right click on it and you can share it, and then you can put a password on it still at that point, so that if he finds it there, he still can't get into it until you tell him that's the password to get into that file. But you're doing peer-to-peer at that point. Does that make sense to y'all? So peer-to-peer, everything, every machine's an equal. Client server, there's one machine that's more important than the other machines. It's basically where it comes down to. Now, in a pure client server environment, which really goes back to when I originally started and the machines I initially used, everything had to go to the server back and forth from the client, and the client really didn't have a whole lot of ability, which actually is similar to the machines in a lot of the other rooms in the building. Not in here, because y'all have actually got your own separate PC sitting at each place. If you go to most of the other rooms in the building, including in the next room, or the following room, I don't remember which one, instead of having a PC sitting there, they've just got a little virtual box sitting there. And you're actually running off the server downstairs on those. And so it is a pure client server involvement, because to get on those computers, you got to connect to the server downstairs, and then it supplies it back. And when you go to do anything, it's storage and everything else is sitting downstairs on the big server. Which is really getting us back to when we had big computers and just terminals connected to the big computer, all scattered all over. Wait 20 years and it'll change back around. All right, questions on all of that to that point? Let's stop at this point today, I think, and then we'll pick up and talk about through these next parts next week. Does that sound good? Because we still got Monday, Wednesday next week to cover materials. And that gets us a fair amount through the chapter. Agreed, only about 11 pages, but then we've really talked on some of it that's later on in the chapter also. So we've jumped ahead to a degree sometimes. And that's how you're going to find when I'm going over the stuff quite often. I'm going to go over basically everything that's in the chapter, but I'm not going to always follow it in the order that the chapter's in. That things will jump back and forwards. Because just like those 4 definitions of internet, intranet, and extranet, that's later on in the chapter, and they'll spend a couple of pages on that, so we've really done a couple of pages later on. Okay? Questions on that? You know what SOHO is, you know what those 4 terms are now, and so on. Then I will see y'all on Monday.